All right, I got my new light in position here. It seems to be overloading the camera a little bit, but this was probably one of the best purchases in a long time that I made was this light, and I showed you the bracket I made for it. But I can really move this around and get this right where I want it, and I can get it from an angle which it's not in the way of the soldering iron. Uh, what a difference, okay? But I want to tell you about bad purchases. Let me locate these bad purchases. Okay, now, I got one more to locate. I should have hit the pause button, huh? Okay, now, we started off with these, okay? And of course, they're going to be a little dark because we got a little bit of backlighting going, but if we shut this off, go this way, a little bit better, huh? Yeah, okay. This pair is almost 50 years old. It's an Exolite, all right? Now, you can move this screw up and down here, and you can actually set it to strip certain size wires. I got it all the way down. I never used it. Now, I had a pair of, I think they were called Champions, and I had them in RCA, and the boss kept picking on them. They had a dial on them right in this area, and you could dial in whatever gauge wire you're working, and they didn't nick wires. These, you have to be very careful that you don't nick the wires, okay? That's the name of the game. If you nick the wire when you strip it, it could break off where the nick is at some point in its lifetime. Now, 50 years old, they're starting to get a little dull. So I'm saying to myself, you know, I could take a stone to them, a little bit of oil, a little bit of Arkansas stone or whatever, and touch up the cutters. But I said, you know, you're always doing that. You're always fixing stuff. Buy something new for a change. So I was in Harbor Freight, and these things were on sale. These are for building up muscles in your hand. They do strip, but when you're getting in here to do your stripping, it's very hard. Yeah, I'm building my muscles up. It's very hard to get just the right amount of pressure because this spring is so strong. Okay, and this is made where if you take this spring off, it's part of the spacer up in here, so you can't do it. So I said, you know, and then sometimes when you're closing it, the two blades actually get hooked. They touch each other. It's junk. Okay, it's Chinese Harbor Freight junk. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know, you just should have went up and bought a new pair of Exolites. Now, the picture showed these. Notice the bend here. Okay, the handle, what it looks like. Okay, I looked for the exact ones, and it's supposed to be new old stock. This is what I got. This is new old stock. It is Exolite, but it only cuts one side of the wire. When you cut down on the insulation, it only cuts on one side. So if you go like this and cut, and then pull it, it won't strip right. Okay, it strips one half. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, there's the braid, because one side isn't sharp. Brand new. 50-year-old pair. You ready for the 50-year-old pair? Okay. That goes to show you, you know, made in USA. And I think a piece of my strip just went in my machine. Well, anyway, yeah, that's what's happened. But so these two were the bad purchase of 2021. This transmitter's bad purchase of 2021, but the light gets the pass. Okay. Now I want to tell you about stripping wires. I worked in this place called Wilway. It was basically a sweatshop. The guy hired handicapped people, and he trained them. And they would sit there and strip wires for 8 hours a day. Some of them would, that's all they did. And he would come by with an eye loop, and he would inspect where they stripped them, make sure they didn't nick the wires. And it was very serious. And because we were doing stuff for the military, and it was the overflow from like Bendix and a few other companies. They had their own technicians, but when they got overtaxed with work, they would send some of the simpler stuff to Wilway. So our stuff had to be inspected by us. Then it would go to Bendix, it would get inspected again. And you didn't nick a wire. And then when you soldered, you didn't bird cage. When you twist the end of the wire, after you strip it, you twist it, you dip it in flux, and then you put it in a solder pot. And the solder wicks up into the wire, and you had to do it just a certain way, and it had to be just right, and it's military spec. And I had to do that. And we also had this thing called an Artos machine. Of all the stripping machines for wires, the Artos actually would take a 1,000-foot spool, 1,000 feet of wire, big heavy spool. You'd roll it into position, put it up you put a pipe through the center of it. It would then feed into an automatic feeding machine. And the automatic feeding machine would put a certain amount of tension on that big spool so it could feed the Artos machine, because the Artos machine did not have the ability to pull off the spool. So you had to keep an eye on the fact that you had enough wire. You had to have the tensioning set correctly on the automatic spooling machine. Now the Artos machine actually has a pair of fingers, and it grabs the wire, it goes to the right, it puts the wire into a set of dies. The dies come in, and then it pulls the wires backwards, and it strips that in. Now it goes forward so many inches, up to 24, and then it cuts and strips the other end. All right. Now, as an operator, you had to make sure that wire didn't get tangled in the machine. You had to make sure it was feeding correctly. And on top of that, all these little ends, all these little pieces of insulation that got stripped off, they could get jammed in the machine itself or in the dies to cut the jacket off the wire to expose the conductor. And those little pieces would go down there. It was thousands and thousands, because you used to do it for 8 hours. So you had in your hand, you had a nozzle, an air nozzle, and you constantly keep spraying to get these little pieces out of the way. And then the real smart thing to do, if you spotted a piece of insulation anywhere in that machine and the air didn't blow it away, stop the machine. So that's what I would do sometimes for 8 hours. And then sometimes the boss would yell, "Hey, Johnny, I'm going to lunch." So you just keep that wire going. And I knew how to change the spools and set up the tensioner and the whole thing. But that was one of the harder stripping machines. It was called an Artos. And when I went to the next place to work, I was talking to a guy. He didn't believe I knew how to use the Artos machine, but I did. But he had all these safety cages on it. And I realized my boss had taken all those cages off because it slows production down. The machine would not operate without the cages closed. And I was thinking to myself, man, that guy was unbelievable. But it was all about production, all about money. And he originally bought the company, or set it all up, and he had gotten these lawyers and doctors to loan him the money. And he had big meetings there, and he paid them back, and he bought out each one of them. And then he owned the place and the building. But he retired very wealthy, but he never could turn off his drive. And that's why I left there. I wasn't going to work with him because I'm a very driven person. But part of the day, I would just sit and stare when I was caught up. Now, he would go in and have tea with the other worker. And they'd sit and have tea for a half hour or 2 hours sometimes and have a discussion. And I got involved sometimes in those discussions. It was all about working harder, working faster. I said to myself, I learned a lot here. I'm going to go to the next place. So the next place was down in Florida. And you had to be NASA certified for soldering. So I had this inspection guy. I would do the soldering. And you had to show it to him. And he'd inspect it. And I said, tell me what you're looking for. He explained what kind of soldering he was looking for. And he didn't mind if you could see the wire, the strands of wire in the cup of the solder on the, what the hell is that, cannon plug. And he says he wants to see that the solder flowed correctly. And that was his big thing. So I start soldering, and he goes, okay. He goes, come in here. We go in a room, and I have to sign a couple papers. And then he has me solder certain things, unsolder something, resolder something. But I got certified, NASA certified for soldering by him. And then I got this little rubber stamp that you put around your neck on a string, and had an ink pad. And I used that when I was in Florida. I could actually inspect my own work and stamp it. Now, when we come back to West Orange, it was done slightly different. Okay, but anyway, I've had my hands on things that maybe other people never got the chance to touch. And but a lot of things is your tools, and a really good tool in a really good mechanic's hand is magic. Okay, but when you got really dull tools, if you're in it experience for years, yeah, I can work with a tool that's dull. I can strip the wires, but it's nice to just come in and a little bit of squeeze and then pull and it strips it. Well, this pair works better than these two pair. How bad is that? This is almost 50 years old. And you can tell when you look at it, it's made so much nicer than this thing. All right. Now, with this one, years ago, you could take the spring off it. This spring could be removed. Now it's like the Harbor Freight one. It's part of the bushing. So if you take this spring mechanism off, this had a spring on it, and you could take it off, put it back on the way they had it, but not anymore. But disappointed. One side don't cut, so that means one of these blades is dull. And you go under a microscope or under you can't see it. Sharpening is an art form, okay? And I don't have it. I mean, I can get something pretty sharp, but some people can really sharpen a knife. I can't do that. And I realize there's certain things I can't do. And I accept the fact that I can't do it. But I just wanted to tell you about these tools. And the light is still, this is still a pretty good purchase, okay? I'm still happy with it. I've used it like 20, 30, more than that already, times. And you can mold this thing. I hope it's in the frame. You can mold this thing. The light can come in any direction you want, and you do all kinds of shapes with the head, and it's really, really good. Okay, I don't know if it's going to burn out in a week from now, but it's been really good compared to a piece of junk I used to have. But yeah, it's nice. And I think my camera's probably overloading. The camera doesn't, it's too much light for the camera, which I think's funny, huh? For me, that's really good brightness. For the camera, I can't handle it. I think that's it. All right, that's it.